Hey, Roland, how are you?
I am doing good. How about yourself?
I am doing great. I am doing very good. Thanks for inviting me on your show you're doing.
Yeah, well, no, I really appreciate you doing this. Again, I know your time is valuable. It's hard to get these things together sometime, especially now that you've got this book out. I know you just finished a book tour, correct? And this is
Yeah.
for everybody that's listening. This is Forrest Rivers. He is a teacher, a an author, a speaker, and after reading your book that I'm going to talk about here, it's right here, COVID-19 and Humanity's Spiritual Awakening. I might even call you a spiritual guru. Do you give yourself that title?
No. I just say I'm a teacher who's bringing a message that I think people need to hear right now, an uplifting message, of positivity and hope.
Exactly. I mean, I think this is the perfect time to have this book out is right now because the world is still reeling from 4 million deaths right now. That's the number right now, and then severe losses in jobs. The economy is looking rough because of that. It's a rough time, especially for people that have been in lockdowns. You think of places like New York, where they couldn't go outside and get the nature healing that I know you mentioned in your book. I like nature healing myself. I have a swing porch outside, and I can see cows across from me, and I can sit there and clear my mind, of all
Absolutely.
of life's stress. And I feel awful for those people that might be living in the concrete jungle and don't get to have that experience even. I mean, that has to be horrible. There's been record numbers of suicide and everything else. So the message of taking the lemons that life has given us and trying to turn that into some sort of lemonade is incredibly important right now. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there's been an enormous amount of like suffering that has come out of this entire period, and I think what people need right now is an uplifting message of how can we use the suffering for our own awakening, for our own growth, our expansion in consciousness. And despite all the suffering, I think there's significant opportunities for growth that can come out of this.
Yeah, you have a quote in your book that I really like. It says, "Suffering is the sandpaper that awakens people," and it's very good. I read your book on Kindle because I was still waiting for this to come in, but I'm a pretty sentimental guy, so I was like, yeah, I got to have this anyway. But that was a extremely powerful quote for me, um, because it's true. Sometimes we get into this repetition of life. I think the daily rat race of getting into a pattern of, oh, I got to get dressed, I'm going to this job every day, the cycle, of being a cog in the machine of life, and to where we don't have a chance to do any self-reflection.
Oh my
um
gosh. Yep.
yeah, so I think that is kind of one of your key points in the book, is now we have that opportunity to really go into some deeper reflection.
Well,
Um,
we've had, I mean, think about it. We've had during the lockdowns, for many people, it was the first time they had to really sit quietly with themselves to contemplate. With all of the death that surrounded us, we've
yes,
had to contemplate our own mortality. And
yes,
the great spiritual teacher, two of them, Stephen Levine and Ram Dass,
mm,
they they both have talked a lot about how you can't live life truly fully until you come to terms with death.
yeah,
And COVID has given us that opportunity to contemplate, to reflect what that means. Um, we've had more time to consider what brings meaning in our life, Roland. during the lockdowns, I talked to numerous people who shared with me how they were wondering, is this all? Getting up at 6 a.m, making my breakfast, I'm off to the office for 10 hours. I come home, I do the same thing over again. And people for the first time had time to really reflect what brings me meaning in this life.
Yes.
Those are positive things and powerful things that have come out of this period, is the time for introspection. You mentioned earlier, more people than ever have been attracted to the outdoors, to the healing power of Mother Nature. And
Yes.
that's been something that's been a positive out of this. And how often do we spend really focusing on the non-monetary, materialistic, worldly aspects of life?
Absolutely. And do those things really truly bring us meaning and purpose and self-worth? One of the things that I wanted to start with was that what you were just mentioning, the acceptance of death as a part of life, and letting go of that fear to be fully present in the moment, I think is a huge, but sometimes one of the most difficult things to do, because especially when we're seeing it all around us. And again, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of other people that we're not in their position. I'm again in a more rural area, but for people that were seeing the suffering firsthand, where they were running out of morgue space and stuff like that, and in places like New York and New Jersey, that's a completely different experience to go through, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety there. But I think it's important, and I wanted to kind of contrast this too, because if we take and we look at some of the faiths that are out there right now, prominent faiths that focus almost solely on the afterlife and what we are attempting to get in the afterlife, to the exclusion of the present, even. That's a big contrast to what you're saying, is we're losing focus on the here and now and what is important in this life.
You can't begin to even focus on the afterlife and all that means. And I'm not denying its presence. I have personal faith that there is absolutely dimensions beyond this. With that being said, though, the real action where our growth happens is in this moment now. We have to learn to be here now. Quoting from Ram Dass, and who wrote that very influential book in the early 70s, Be Here Now. That's where the real action is. That's what the stuff of life is. That's where you develop happiness and joy, and you find that inner peace, is learning to be present. And sometimes it takes earth-shattering crises like the kind that we're going through now to lead us to become more present and to be here and now.
Exactly. And I think you mentioned a lot in the book, meditation as a tool to help us see past some of this and to get a grip on what's going on in our own world. But I think it's also a good positive healing tool. You mentioned something in the book called meta meditation, yes, which I had not heard of before, but it kind of reminded me of some sayings, speaking of things as if they were, or speaking things into existence, but also, putting that positive energy out towards, other sentient beings.
It's a powerful practice. It's contagious too.
Yeah.
It's contagious too. And it has enrolled, and it has science has even proved that the power of love and kindness can literally put to end wars. There were, I think I talked about it in the book, there were scientific studies that literally validated when you gathered large groups of people together in war-torn areas. This was done in Israel and in Lebanon. when people gather their thoughts and send feelings of goodwill to other beings, the literally the instances of war and violence subsided. And these are scientifically validated studies. So not only is it a profound practice for everyone to begin individually, but it can have a seismic effect on a collective scale of consciousness.
You know, I think the crazy important thing about that is, as a society, I feel like we are slowly drinking this poison from corporate media, where we're being taught to otherize individuals. We're putting labels on every other person. If you're on the right, then you're a fascist. If you're on the left, then you're a commie. If you're, you know, it's always a label or a title, and it really is poison. And there was a great quote. I was listening to an interview with Denzel Washington, and he was talking to some reporters, and he said, you know, really, it's not even about truth anymore. It's about who's first. Who can be first in getting this message out? And whether that is to, you know, advance some narrative, whether it's to sow division and create ratings, I don't know what the purpose is, but that poison is still there, regardless of what the purpose is.
It comes from ego. It comes from ego. It comes from this idea of an illusion of separateness, that we're somehow divided and that we're somehow not united. And that, of course, is a fallacy. That's not true. These divisions are manufactured. They're not real divisions. And for that reason, they are absolutely, Roland, as you said, they are a poison.
Yeah.
And I hope that during this period, as more people take the time to reflect and contemplate on the meaning of life, they start realizing that these divisions are just that. They're poison, they're toxic, and they're things that don't speak to who we really are, to the spirit.
Which is why I think this sending positive energy out, regardless of who the people are that we're sending that energy out to, I think is a good mental process to go through, to where now we're not looking at others as in terms of some label. We're looking at them as other living beings who are also suffering in the ways that we're suffering, and in ways that we don't possibly know. And I think that maybe we squandered as a society the opportunity that we had in the beginning. I think in the beginning, we all kind of remember where we were when the virus, when we noticed the virus was really taking hold. I remember I was in a supermarket and I was just shopping with my wife. It was a normal day. And then I'm like, why is everybody taking all the toilet paper? And like, what? Like, you know,
it was the toilet paper.
It was the toilet paper. And why is there no meat in the shelves? And you know, the crazy thing, all it takes is that second for you to get in that kind of herd mentality of, oh no, we need stuff. Quick, grab the fear. You know, and it was crazy. But I remember that moment, and I think just like 9/11. We all had this kind of collective consciousness of the pain from that, and we remember where we were. We remember but we were in it together, and as a nation. And I think we almost squandered that. There are some people like you that I think are trying to rescue us from that mindset. But again, things like corporate media, I think we also, at the worst time, we were having a political election, which already sows division. It already creates division. So we have to rescue that. What are some ways that you think we can get back to that collective conscious again of being all in this together, without all the crap that's currently filling our minds from corporate media and from talking heads, be they political or religious or other folks that may be pitting us against each other?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Roland, and something that I think many people are contemplating now. How do we reinstill this sense of an inherent understanding that we're all one, that we are united? And there's some things that we really can do. One thing that you've talked a lot about so far is to tune out from the purveyor of all of this division and fear, which of course is the corporate media. Um, the don't be so reliant on these news outlets. Don't engage it. Don't allow the fear and the division and the toxicity to to define your day. So unplugging as much as we possibly can from
Yeah.
the mainstream outlets that are just, as you said, Roland, uh, um, leading to more division, needless division at that, and fear. Because when you're fearful, that's when you really start to classify people into different groups and start
Exactly.
view who are really your brothers and sisters as the enemy. And I think that that's one thing we can all do is tune out from those mainstream outlets. They're poisonous. And I don't care if we're talking about Fox or if we're news or if we're talking about MSNBC or
Yeah.
we're talking about online publications. They're all doing the same thing, all that division. Another thing that we can do
Ratings,
is
etc.
ratings and to make more profit,
Sensationalizing. Yeah.
sensationalism for more profit. Another thing we can do is something more individually. Um, you know, cultivating in our lives a sense of quietude and peace within us. So actively, actively engaging in activities that bring more peace and compassion and understanding. Meditation certainly is one of those practices that we can all do. You don't have to sit for 45 minutes to an hour a day if you don't have that time. It can be as simple as 5 to 10 minutes of just quiet reflection time, tuning into your breath. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. Um, Connecting with nature, getting out into even if you live in a city or an urban area, getting out on nature walks in the city parks, which are becoming, more and more cities are developing greenway systems, and that's something we can do. Gardening is another practice, of course. Um, and many more people have been engaging in that over starting their own gardens over COVID. There have been huge uptick in number of people just starting their own backyard gardens. I mean, that's something we can do. Um, Finding a creative outlet, whether it be music, poetry, painting. So a lot of it falls on that individual level. That's another thing I think as we cultivate more peace within ourselves, naturally, right? Naturally, the more people that begin to engage in that kind of positive self-help behavior, that spreads to the collective consciousness. And I think another thing that we can do is, in our country at least, start prioritizing in our schools, start prioritizing in our communities the importance of service to one another. So maybe having, more heavy service components in our public schools with volunteering. There's nothing like the spirit of service to unite groups of people who otherwise may deem each other as the other.
Right. Exactly. I think you mentioned that aspect in a chapter of your book called A Spiritual War. And I think, that is, just to go back to that chapter, and I hope you don't mind, I'm looking down at notes because I have the memory of a goldfish. So without notes, I don't remember what I did in the morning or what I had for breakfast. But in A Spiritual War, you talked about devoting oneself to service, how we need to learn to break the grip of ego, as you called it, to realize that there's more than us, I think, in that moment. And
Yes.
And really not just devoting oneself to service, but the key point that you point out in the book is without any expectation of getting anything in return,
Well,
right?
that's the true spirit of service. That's the,
Right, exactly. You're not going to
and
get a pat on the back
no, you're not going to get
for it.
a tax break or get
Exactly.
anything like that. You're doing it just because you realize that those who are suffering are you who is suffering, and they are your family. There's no other reason than simply to alleviate suffering.
Yeah,
And for engaging, and there's nothing more human than wanting to help alleviate another suffering. And for that, you don't search for any accolades because you're doing what is just natural.
exactly. And I think you make a good point in reaching out to areas that maybe you know, to understand people that are not like you, maybe going into other areas outside of your comfort zone, even to engage with people that are on a different level than you. Because then we start getting past the, oh, well, maybe, all of these talking heads aren't correct with what they say about these type of people, or their beliefs or whatever. One of the things that I really enjoyed about your book, because I am a history nut and a cultures nut, was you get into a section where you're talking about kind of ancient wisdom, what we can learn from people that were very much connected to the land, like our Native Americans. Here, you mentioned Myrtle Driver, a friend of yours from the Eastern Band of Cherokee. And I like that idea of learning from that native wisdom. My wife and I don't know if you've seen this show or not. My wife and I are big fans of a show called Alone. And in Alone, they basically drop these people off in the wilderness with nothing. They have nothing, and maybe 10 items that they got to choose. But they have to fend for themselves. And there's been a couple of instances where, like, there was a girl named Callie from season 7, and she's basically out there in the Arctic tundra, surviving. And you think, man, this looks horrible. She is freezing to death out there, but she didn't want to leave. She said, I've never felt more connected, not just to nature or anything like that, but to life itself, right?
Yes.
Never felt more connected to life, and having that quiet. There was a couple of times where a couple of the people there said, listen to that, it's nothing, and we're getting a bit of that quiet reflection time. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about that native wisdom? And I don't think it has to be, in my own view, I don't think it has to be something from a particular culture per se. I think part of it is built into our DNA from our ancestors way back when. It's just a part of who we are. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. It the way I understand it, and I've had it explained to me and directly experienced, it's a oneness with the earth. It's a oneness with the cycles of life. It's an inherent connection to the sunrise, to the sunset, to the change of the seasons, to listening to your breath while you're journeying through the woods. It's a primal connection. It's a notion that everything that is in nature has a living spirit and a consciousness, and it has an aliveness. And it's an understanding that who we really are beings that are tied to the earth, that are tied to all of being. As you described it, Roland, it's a primal instinct, but even more than that, it's an intuitive wisdom that we come from the earth and that we're part of it. And, I often think that if you really break it down, I mean, why have human beings entered a period of such great suffering where we have war, climate change, our responses even to this pandemic, some of our more irrational responses, the mass famines, the greed and corruption we have in our government. So all of these endemic problems that we have, they all stem, I really think, from the notion that we've gotten so far away from our inherent connection to the earth, of our inherent connection to nature. We've created all of these because we've alienated ourselves and we think we're separate from the earth. We've created all of these structures of hubris. In fact, I would argue that most of our obsession with consumerism and our over reliance on money and material wealth all stems from the fact that that's all a distraction.
Yeah.
To give us temporary satisfaction, when what we secretly yearn for is that inherent connection we have with nature, which you described very well with the alone, that metaphor. And I think a lot of our suffering are stems from that fact of how deeply disrooted we've become from the earth. And I think that native wisdom is telling us that we have to reestablish a relationship with the planet. And we can't really respect each other if we don't respect what we're a part of, which is the earth.
Right. And I think not just, the loss of those monetary values or anything like that, but really in our daily life, maybe even before the pandemic, we would have this sense of control, like what we can control. And I think that there was a much bigger belief of what we did have control over. And the pandemic kind of stripped that away to say, there's a lot that you don't. I mean, imagine, if the giant supermassive volcano underneath Yellowstone were to just blow up, you would definitely know that we don't have control in that instance.
Or an asteroid, which is the Hollywood movie.
Asteroid, yeah. Where's Ben Affleck to save us, right? But it's one of those things where it takes events like this to realize, wow, we really don't have. It's an illusion. The control is an illusion.
It's completely an illusion. That's another thing too. And when you're connected to the earth and you're connected to nature, you become more in tune with those rhythms. That one of the key aspects of the earth is that while it has its own cycles and it has its sure harmonies and rhythms, it also has its spontaneous events. Yes. Where a lot happens that you don't have control over. And one of the things that we've had to learn from COVID is definitely to relinquish control, to surrender to the events and realize that, crises like this sort are going to happen. And we can't really control it. What we can control, though, is our reaction to how we meet these events. That's the key. And in that sense, one of the major lessons we've learned from this is to let go and let God. We need to sort of surrender, learn to flow rather than learn to control. And there are some very important lessons that we've taken from this for our own peace of mind. Because the less that we try to control and the more that we learn how to flow, the more peace naturally comes from that within us.
Exactly. I like that. I think that you can do that. Part of taking that and saying, okay, this is what I can control, this how I react to something. You mentioned in Shapers of Our Destiny, which is a chapter in the book, meeting a guy named Noble on a mountain hiking trail, which I got to talk to you a little bit about too later, because I actually live in the Blue Ridge Mountains myself. I just live up in the Virginia part of it. So the Appalachian Trail is right up here. We have dragons up here. It's gorgeous. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, I'm in the Western North Carolina in a mountain town called Franklin.
Right.
And we have the Appalachian Trail about 15 minutes from the house. So really cool that you have that too. That's that's beautiful where you are too.
Oh my gosh, I made the
Same
mistake.
mountains.
I don't know. It's funny you say that because when I moved here, my wife is originally from here, and when I moved here, I was instantly corrected by a coworker at the time who told me I was saying it wrong. He said, "You cannot
Yep.
call it Appalachian, you call it Appalachian." And
Appalachia. Yep.
and then he sent me a video, which I thought was interesting from a historical perspective, about how it was the historical roots of Appalachian versus Appalachian, and how the carpetbaggers were the ones that came down here to call it Appalachian. But anyway, see, my mind does this. I go off on little side.
No, you're okay. Yeah.
But it is amazingly gorgeous up here, and I am blessed with that. But getting back to Shapers of Our Destiny, you talked about meeting this guy named Noble, and he says, I think you'd asked him why he was going on this journey, because he was trying to make the full 2181 trek up all through, which I think is insane. Like, how long does that take to make a massive trip like that? It's crazy.
About 6 to 7 months for the average person. And he was doing it during the pandemic, where there were a lot of hostels along the way, as you know, on the trail towns closed down. So imagine the challenge. Yeah.
Oh man, I couldn't do it with, you get out there, and I've camped where it's been dark. You can't see anything. There's no lights out there from a nearby town, and you hear the sounds of the wilderness around you, and you start to think about things. At least I do in my mind. Is that a mountain lion? Is there a lion here? Like, what's coming to eat me right now? But again, he said, because it's my destiny and I'm the shaper of it. And I loved that saying, because when you really read it and look at it, he's not talking about trying to control the outside world at all.
No,
he's talking about himself and what he can control, his own destiny, his own sense of, this is what I'm meant to do. This is my purpose in life. And I think
he was filled with presence.
Yes.
He was the most uncontrolled from the outside. I remember feeling that presence with him. The outside control, that media we talked about, that the mainstream media, that the controls on the exterior had absolutely zero pull on him. He was completely driven by his own intuitive spirit, and his spirit told him his destiny was to hike the entire AT, which, by the way, was not his first time doing it, which was astounding to me.
Now, did he tell you, because in the book you mentioned getting the people that can do this, or maybe the people that can do, there's 3, I think, long distance trails.
Yep, there's the AT, the PCT, Pacific Crest Trail, and then the Continental Divide Trail. And yeah, absolutely.
And he'd done the other 2? Did you ask him if he'd done the other 2 already?
Yeah, he had done both of the other 2 as well.
That is insane. That is crazy.
Unbelievable. Yeah, and I think he did it. I think which is pretty unorthodox. I think he started with the longest first, which was the Pacific Crest, then did the AT, then the Continental Divide. He was going back on the AT.
That's called the ripping off the Band-Aid method, where it's just, let's just go with the hardest thing first and get used to, oh, this is what we're going to expect. But I wonder how people out there, because that really made me think and consider finding one's purpose, because that's kind of what we're trying to get out of this experience is finding meaning, finding purpose, self-actualizing ourselves to be something more than the cog in the machine. We want to find our purpose. The Purpose-Driven Life is another book that's out there, but we need to find
Yes.
our purpose. So for people that are out there that have been locked in this pattern for years, decades, even in this corporate pattern of I'm getting dressed, I'm putting my tie on, I go to work, I say bye to the wife, I come home, I eat dinner, I sleep, rinse, and repeat
Yep.
every day for decades. Maybe they feel lost after this. They don't know what that is anymore, and it's hard for them to drill down on it. Maybe they put that pressure on themselves, saying, you know what, this does suck. I don't want to do this anymore. Please help me get out of it. What are some ways that they can break down that past barrier, the wall that's been built over all those years, and see a future that fits them, fits their individual life?
So this is funny, we're having this conversation because Roland, I literally just was speaking to my dear friend Alex the other day. He lives down in Charleston, South Carolina, and we were talking literally about this, and he's been working in an office for an engineering company for a long time, that he's not fulfilling his deeper spirit, his deeper intuitive purpose fields. And he's taking 6 months away. He's saved up, he's been saving up money, and he's just gonna take like a 6-month hiatus away from work, and he's gonna explore life more deeply. And and again, I'm not saying that's for everybody. Obviously, he's been in a nice situation where he's been able to put away money for that. Of course, not everybody's in that kind of situation. So that's the most obvious thing I can think of, is reclaim your life. If you need to take a 3-month, 6-month hiatus away from your office job or work to be able to re-examine what really matters. That's one thing that can do. I remember one of the most impactful years spiritually for me that I've ever had was I had a whole year basically away from my full-time teaching job. That's what brought me to the Smoky Mountains. These mountains, I ended up living with my partner on a little cabin. We had been living in the city for many years, and we just moved off to a cabin. I wrote my first book, and our whole life was basically just like contemplation and nature, spending hours upon hours upon hours hiking through Pisgah National Forest. And, so reclaiming your life through maybe a retreat, take 3-6 months away from your work and re-examine what really matters. Now, if you can't do that, there's obviously other practices you can start instilling into your day-to-day life that'll jumble your routine and allow you the space to find what brings you meaning. And I've mentioned it twice before in this interview, but meditation. People who are caught in that routine, I highly recommend establishing some kind of daily meditation practice, whether it be in the morning, right when you rise, or right before you go to bed, are usually the best times to meditate. But I would recommend a daily meditation practice, because you can't help in the course of meditation, certain things will come up telling you this is not the path you're supposed to be on.
Right.
You can kind of figure out where you need to go. I think people, for others who are caught in the routine, who really maybe can't afford to leave, I recommend taking time, maybe every couple months, to be able to go into some kind of silent retreat. You can go to a retreat center, maybe go camping every other weekend, or find a place for stillness where you can contemplate what really brings you meaning. And before you know it, you may find yourself leaving that job or leaving that 9 to 5 that's not really satisfying. But I'd say retreat, meditation, maybe an extended period away from your work, taking that time. Those are all things that really could help you. So, and injecting nature, we've talked about before, Roland, injecting nature into your day-to-day life. and maybe when you come out of the office at 5 o'clock, go, instead of going straight home, go to the woods for an hour walk or bike ride.
Yeah.
And nature has a wonderful way of speaking to us, of informing us that we're not following our life's purpose. And not only does it inform us when we're not following our purpose, more importantly, it tells us what our life purpose should be. I don't think it's a coincidence that I, myself started finding what I think is my life's purpose the more time I started spending in nature. I think that's directly linked together. And not only that, it gives you a lot more clarity.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is you're talking about this, and I'm remembering conversations I've had with friends in the past where they were almost romanticizing the idea of a zombie apocalypse because during the zombie apocalypse, you're watching, Walking Dead or whatever, and society has broken down. You have no choice anymore. You are living out here. This is life. This is it. You have no choice. So I think the romanticizing of that is more so on, they had no choice anymore. I'm sorry, boss, I can't make it to work today. The world is ending. There's no choice anymore. But
that's what this has done. I mean, it hasn't been quite our zombie apocalypse, but COVID's definitely been that big turning point, a crisis that jolted us out of that, as you described, wake up, button the shirt, go to work, come home, say hi to the wife, rinse, repeat. That whole thing kind of got thrown for a twist, over the last year and change. And that's kind of why I feel like this message is sort of urgent, because it's like we have the conditions to find meaning, to find more joy, to find more unity, to find more purpose in our lives. It's here. This moment has arrived right now. And there's two ways we can really go, Roland. We can get lost in all the fear and the division and all of the ego and look back and be like, what did I do over those last 2 years? How did I improve myself? Or we can literally open up to this strange and to be fair, tragic suffering that we've seen. We can open up to all of this discomfort and and we can work with it. And out of that, we might be surprised what we find.
Yeah, the moment is now, because we've been temporarily unplugged from the matrix.
Yes.
But the plug is coming back.
Well, and that's why they're so desperate to get everyone back to work, right? The powers that be want everybody back to work right now, because we've had too much time to sit and be like, wait a minute, I don't really have to be a cog in the machine. Do I even agree with the machines? In philosophy, there's been more, for example, I think what you're doing, Roland, sort of speaks to that, unplugging from the matrix. This is the future. In my mind, this is the real future of media. The independent journalists, true independent journalists, starting up their own channels and their own podcasts. I've been amazed at all of these podcast hosts that I've been talking to and been on. And it really is like a movement of people unplugging themselves to be purveyors of a new message of higher consciousness. And it's fascinating to see this actually happening. And that's why the powers that be are desperate to get us back. Even if cases continue to climb, they're going to be very reluctant to keep us home still, because people are starting to see through the illusion, through this facade.
Exactly. And see, this is part of it's great that you bring that up. This is my version of trying to break out of that. And I still have the tether that I'm sawing at right now, but that's just to pay the bills. I have 3 beautiful little girls that I have to take care of. And
hey, no judgment, Roland, no judgment. I mean, I'm still, as I'm going around doing these talks and writing and everything. And, I'm still having to go work under my legal name. I still work for for a college, and and what could be more in some ways in the box than our modern day college system? I mean, that's literally the breeding ground for the matrix. Anybody who's important in the matrix has to pass through the college system to get there, get their credentials. So I feel you. So even if we're all sawing, we're all in this together. We're all sawing our ways out of it traps us a little bit. It's difficult, but it can be done. I think
absolutely. I think one of the things that I started with was you have key moments in your life. I think we talked about 9/11, we talked about the beginning of the pandemic, but there's other key moments in your life where you realize a cognitive shift where something has changed in your mindset and how you're viewing things. And part of mine was I was plugged into naively thinking that I'm making this big difference, helping in certain political movements. And I started realizing just the toxicity that was there. And am I really being a part of the solution, or am I being part of the problem? Because if I'm being part of the problem, I don't want to be here anymore. I have to change this. And that was a while ago that started in me, but it completely shifted how I processed the world. And just that thought, just those words, am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution? And really that in itself, you have this quote, and I think this is an important quote on what we're talking about and getting out of the machine. And I'm going to butcher this guy's last name. I should absolutely not do that because I have a horrible last name to remember myself. But the quote is, if you wish to get out of a prison, the first thing you must do is realize that you're in a prison. If you are free, you can't escape. Yep. So it's G.I. Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff, yeah. But that quote of first realizing that you're trapped in a prison to be the first step to freedom is was mind blowing to me. Really
absolutely. And that's what you mean when you say, am I part of the solution or am I part of the problem? And that problem would metaphorically be you are working within the confines of the prison. You may be rearranging the tables and the furniture in the prison, thinking that you're actually making the change. Trust me, I've been there. Oftentimes I ask myself that every day, which is why I know I need to leave formally teaching in the colleges. If I'm asking myself that question every day, am I part of the problem or the solution?
Yes.
The answer is probably more likely the problem, like base that down totally. So, but once you realize, that frame, that shift in consciousness from, oh my gosh, I'm actually in the prison, then you become fully liberated because now you're thinking, well, I've acknowledged that I'm here. Now, how do I plan my escape? And that's a very empowering moment to realize, I'm in the prison. It doesn't have to be a discouraging moment that you push away. It's a very important transition point into moving from the problem to the solution. And that is a powerful moment that I think anyone on the path of higher consciousness eventually has to face. That you've been a part of the problem, and trust me, Roland, I've been there too. When I was younger, I was into a lot of political activism, and I'd be around a lot of I'd be at a peace rally, and most of the people would be angry at the peace rally. I'm like, wait a minute, is there am I creating more division by being here, or am I helping things? And I'm not saying that peace rallies don't have their place; they certainly do. more kind of getting at the point that, maybe what we need in this period of time and that COVID has provided us is to move totally outside of that box, to really step out of our prison
Right.
and enter that unknown. And it's scary, to step off in the unknown. As you said, you still have kids, you still have 3 beautiful daughters to provide for. I have my things I still have to cover and pay for. The monetary system really tries to keep us in that prison.
Yeah.
But this period of time has shown us the possibility that, yes, it is possible to step outside of it.
Right, right. I think there's a good opportunity also that you mentioned in the book. The most important thing that I got out of here was that personal mission. But I think as a society, there's also a big opportunity here. If enough people can kind of tap into the awakening that you're talking about. You mentioned it in a chapter called Real Democracy, which I'm a fan of. There's a couple of things that I don't know where we would maybe line up with, but I like the vision of smaller community because I think that's where you get the most impact on that local level. So basically, let me go back here. You talked about a vision of the future where we can enter more of a direct democracy with the people. I think of old systems like the All Thing and stuff like that from Icelandic traditions or
Sure.
But can you kind of give me a vision in your mind of where we as a society could go if we embraced some of this spiritual awakening? And does it have to be the whole society? Can it just be small groups of people
Sure.
that decide to break away from the societal matrix?
Yeah. So there is a wonderful quote, and I know he's, usually frowned upon, but Timothy Leary had a wonderful quote in the 60s that said, "Turn on, tune in, drop out." And the idea is, turn on to higher, turn on to like this movement of consciousness that's happening around you, this evolutionary impulse to grow in our consciousness. Tune in to what's happening within you. Turn on, tune in, and drop out. That means drop out of the prison that we were talking about. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to do that. I don't think we necessarily need the entire population. We could have, as people begin to awaken, we might start trying alternative systems of living. We may try living off the land. Now, of course, what that depends on is forming community to be able to pool and share our resources. It doesn't have to be we don't have to lose all technology like many of the hippie communes in the 60s and 70s. You can still have internet, you can have rainwater collection systems, you can have still a lot of the modern day conveniences that we want. The communities might still have laptops and community run businesses, but the difference is there may be a pooling of resources. The money you make as a business may go back into sustainable development, into becoming a statement of a new vision, really.
Right.
I think that there's a lot more people already who are joining in community to enact a new vision. We don't necessarily need the entire population to do it. I mean, the more people who come to that need to evolve is obviously a positive aspect. We need more people to do that. But more importantly, people need to come to it on their own. They really do. You can't force anybody to do anything. Part of that new vision of a society post-COVID won't, in my belief, where I'm standing, won't be based on coercion, won't be based on fear, and won't be based on unwarranted hierarchy. It'll be based firmly in our communities, based firmly on a brother and sisterhood, more rooted in nature, and with a vision on maximizing freedom and respect. And I think that's a natural outgrowth of individual spiritual practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the more people are trying to coerce others into a certain attitude, the more resistance they're going to naturally get from it.
Yeah, well,
I know that.
that's one of the major problems in our society today, right? Right, Roland, is that we're a society more and more based on coercion,
Yes.
based on coercion. When we really delve down to what the spiritual path is, it's a quest for freedom, internal freedom. And so once we find that internal freedom, which is based on our connection to everything,
Mhm.
oneness, the interconnectedness of everything in this universe, and then you realize that you are a child at play within that internal quest for freedom.
Yeah.
Why would the exterior, the outward way we live, not be a reflection of that too?
Exactly.
And so I think right now we're facing a reckoning of trying to link up this evolutionary strand in consciousness, that's something that's happening within us,
Right.
matching that up with the outside, which still right now is based off of ego and coercion. And again, COVID has been an interesting moment that may be pulling those threads to get closer together, or maybe exposing
Right.
the inconsistencies.
I think there's a lot of different ways that coercion takes form as well. When I look at it, it could be a direct form of some sort of material threat or something like that. You're going to lose X, Y, or Z by doing this. It could be a personal issue where what are these people going to think about me if I go this other way? I really care about how their thoughts about me and how they perceive me. So there's kind of this interpersonal connection to that as well. I think you have to really truly, like you were saying, get down to understanding who you are truly.
And that's been the real problem in political activism, is that many of the activists, and I don't mean this with judgment, I mean this more with just matter of fact, many of our activist groups, not all, but many, haven't done the work on themselves first. If you don't know yourself, how can you enact change?
Exactly.
Change starts from the individual first, at least where I'm standing.
And that's extremely troublesome, because we have in our society, and it's getting worse and worse. Part of the reason for this channel is opening dialogue so that people can understand different thought processes around different groups of people and have some understanding, because honestly we've built up what I call political tribalism in our society,
Big time.
where you might have a different point of view, but because someone is saying it that's on team blue or team red, now we have to blindly follow this and not question it. And sometimes you have to stand up and question it and say, wait, is that really where we want to go? But during this period, if you do that, you're likely to be ostracized. You're likely to say, for people to say, okay, well, you're not really one of the team, and that's a scary thing for a lot of people, because they want to be on quote unquote the right side of history when it comes to certain things. But really what they're not getting is they're either seeing what you talked about in the spiritual war. They're either seeing a black side or a white side. They're not understanding the duality of it. They're not understanding
the interrelationship of, quote, both sides.
Yeah.
One side depends on its breath from the other, and vice versa. It's a very like a Taoist idea that all seeming opposites actually fold upon each other in the end. And that is when you start realizing that all seeming polarities actually merge together. That's when a society or a culture operates in a harmonious and peaceful fashion. But as long as you get stuck in duality and us versus them mentality, it breeds more division, fear, and the roots of hatred.
Exactly. So I want to get as a final note here, because I know we're wrapping up on our hour. But as a final note, what are some things that you want people to take away from your book, or just this time in history as their chance? This is your chance to tell them, take this opportunity for whatever that may be, and also, how do you think we need to go to begin healing as individuals and as a society? And what are some of the impediments you may see to that, both personally and the mental blocks that we may form, and so on? What would you like people to know?
Yeah, so those are wonderful questions, Roland. First, I'd say to everybody that while this period has been an intense period of suffering, and tragedy, difficulty for many, I do not in any way want to minimize the real suffering people have been through. The real question, though, moving forward is, what can we do with this suffering? And how can we use this how can we work with the suffering to move us in a more positive and peaceful direction? And I would say to everybody that this is a very unique period to do some very important inner work on ourselves. And I would say, don't squander this opportunity, and use this period to cultivate greater faith, compassion, and awareness, because in the end, when we do die, all we take with us is how well people remembered us by in terms of our love and compassion. That's all that's important. And I would say that this period, do not give into the fear, do not give into the divisiveness, do not give into the anger, but embrace the fact that we are taking a leap into the unknown, and that what may be around the corner may prove to be a catalyst for something truly great for the evolution of our species and for the planet. So, that's one message I would like everybody to kind of take away from this, is that this is an important time to inspire yourselves, to turn within and to figure out your higher purpose. And I think, what can we do right now? Again, I said it before, you can turn off from all of the negative channels and purveyors of fear and separation, and tune into more to channels that are focused on evolving our consciousness, our compassion, our awareness, and that are trying to take a step outside that prison, like channels like Roland's here. Embrace those outlets that are trying to push us better in a positive direction, and also cultivate in your daily life, find some time for contemplation, and cultivate a space of stillness and inner peace, whether that be a meditation practice, establishing half an hour of prayer every day, time for creative expression, nature walks. Make sure that you're serving that inner part of yourself as well, right? And those are some things that I would like all the listeners and viewers to take away from that. This is the time for inner growth, and this is a time to make serious changes in our lives to find greater meaning.
Absolutely. Well, I want to remind everyone again, Forrest's book, COVID-19 and Humanity's Spiritual Awakening. It's on Amazon. You can also get it on your Kindle. It's a fantastic book. I was kind of nervous, honestly, when I heard that you taught it at college. I was expecting textbook probably, but it's a really easy read, and it flows very nicely from one chapter to another. And I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today about all of this. I think this is probably one of the most important subjects in this moment right now, for people to grow, and this is our opportunity. It's our opportunity to awaken, to heal, and to take another path, the road less traveled in our own lives. So Forrest, where's some other places that people can find information about you and what you're doing?
You can go to my website, forrestrivers.com. And I have up there, I have a number of interviews from podcasts I've given. You can get both my books up there. And I'm going to soon have, like, when I can start speaking like face to face again, I'll be having a, you can see where I'll be speaking then. And you can also reach me by email at forrestrivers4@gmail.com. And I'm always open to talk and receive comments and have dialogue. So
That's awesome. And that's Forrest with 2 R's, guys.
yep.
Yeah, let me know when you're up here walking Dragon's Tooth Trail or something like that. We'll do a video of the trail walk or something like that.
Oh, that would be awesome, Roland.
I wish you the best of luck with your book and everything that you got going on. Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much. It was an honor to be on your show.
All right. Well, everybody, remember to keep seeking truth, no matter where it brings you. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.